It's about 7 p.m. here in the Salt Lake Valley. Thursday, October 30th, 2025. And we'll get started soon enough. Thought we'd sit down and enjoy this episode of some guy who invented some kind of wood stove way back that saved the day. You like wood stoves? Halcyon, nice to see you. Feel free to come in and hang out. Grace to you. Let's see where we are. Oh, yeah, here we go.
The woodpile was half the size of his neighbor's. James Peterson stood in his yard in late October 1871, looking at the modest stack of firewood he had prepared for the coming winter. His neighbor, Robert Miller, walked past and stopped, staring at the woodpile with concern. "James, that's not near enough wood for winter. You'll freeze by January." James smiled. "I'll be fine, Robert. My family will stay warm all winter with that wood." Robert shook his head. "That's maybe 3 cords. I've got 12 cords stacked, and I'll probably need more. You're making a mistake." But James Peterson was not making a mistake. He had discovered a heating system so efficient that it would use 1/4 the wood of a traditional fireplace, would heat his home more effectively, and would cost him almost nothing to operate. By the end of that winter, while his neighbors were desperately cutting green wood and burning furniture to stay warm, James's family would be comfortable and warm with wood to spare. This is the story of how one pioneer family revolutionized winter heating through a simple but ingenious system combining thermal mass and optimized airflow. How they survived the brutal winter of 1871 to 72 in comfort while their neighbors suffered. And how their innovation spread across the frontier, saving countless families from freezing and financial ruin. James Peterson was born in 1835 in Norway, immigrating to America with his family in 1850 at age 15. He grew up in Wisconsin, learning carpentry and masonry from his father, who had been a builder in the old country. By 1868, James had married, started a family, and decided to homestead in Minnesota Territory, claiming 160 acres under the Homestead Act of 1862. The Peterson family, James, his wife Anna, and their 3 children, Eric, age 8, Ingrid, age 6, and baby Lars, built their home in the summer of 1868,
Baby
a log cabin
Lars.
measuring 20 by 24 feet with a loft for sleeping. Like most frontier families, they heated their home with a large stone fireplace, burning wood constantly from October through April to stay warm. But James quickly realized that the traditional fireplace was incredibly inefficient. He would burn enormous amounts of wood, 8 to 10 cords per winter, and the house was still cold. The fireplace would be blazing hot, but the heat went straight up the chimney. The air near the fireplace would be uncomfortably hot, while the corners of the cabin remained freezing. At night, when the fire died down, the temperature would plummet, and the family would wake to frost on the inside walls. During the winter of 1868 to 69, James calculated that he was spending nearly half his time cutting, splitting, and hauling firewood. The work was exhausting and dangerous. Several neighbors had been injured or killed in logging accidents. And the cost in time, labor, and resources was enormous. James estimated that firewood represented perhaps 30% of his family's total annual expenses when you factored in the time spent gathering it. There had to be a better way. James remembered the heating systems from Norway, where winters were long and brutal and fuel was expensive. Norwegian homes used masonry stoves, large structures made of brick or soapstone that absorbed heat from a fire and radiated it slowly over many hours. These stoves were incredibly efficient, using a fraction of the wood required by open fireplaces. But James had never built such a stove, had never seen detailed plans, and had only childhood memories of how they worked. He would have to figure it out himself, would have to experiment and innovate, would have to create his own design adapted to frontier conditions and available materials. He spent the winter of 1869 to 70 observing his fireplace, trying to understand where the heat was going and how it could be captured. He noticed that the chimney stones were warm, sometimes too hot to touch, which meant enormous amounts of heat were being absorbed by the chimney and then lost to the outside air. He noticed that the fire burned hottest when it had good airflow, but that most of the heat from a hot fire went straight up the chimney without heating the room. He began to formulate a theory. If he could route the hot smoke through a long path of masonry before it exited the chimney, the masonry would absorb the heat and radiate it into the room over many hours. And if he could control the airflow to make the fire burn hotter and more completely, he could extract more heat from less wood. In the spring of 1870, James began designing his heating system. He sketched plans, calculated dimensions, and gathered materials. His design would incorporate 3 key innovations. First, a firebox made of fire brick that would burn wood at very high temperatures with controlled airflow. The firebox would be small and insulated, creating an intense, efficient fire that would burn wood completely, leaving almost no smoke or creosote. Second, a serpentine flue system that would route the hot exhaust gases through several hundred pounds of masonry before exiting the chimney. The gases would enter the flue at perhaps 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit and exit at perhaps 200 degrees, meaning that 1,000 degrees worth of heat had been transferred to the masonry. Third, a thermal mass chamber surrounding the flue system, made of river rock and clay, that would store heat and radiate it slowly over 12 to 24 hours. The thermal mass would act like a battery, storing heat from a short, hot fire and releasing it gradually throughout the day and night. The design was ambitious and unproven. James had no guarantee it would work, no way to test it without building it, and no one to consult for advice. If he was wrong, he would have wasted months of work and materials, and his family would face another winter with inadequate heating. But James believed in his design. The physics made sense. Heat rises, but if you force it through a long path of masonry, the masonry will absorb it. Thermal mass stores heat and releases it slowly. Controlled airflow makes fires burn hotter and more efficiently. These were established principles, and James was simply applying them in a new way. In June 1870, James began construction. The first step was the hardest, partially dismantling the existing fireplace that had served his family for 2 years. Anna watched nervously as James removed stones from the structure, worried that they were destroying their only source of heat with winter still months away. "What if it doesn't work, James?" she asked. "What if we've torn down a working fireplace for nothing?" James understood her fear. They were gambling their family's survival on an untested design, on his memories of Norwegian stoves, on his belief that he could improve on centuries of frontier heating tradition. But he had calculated the risks, had planned carefully, and believed the potential reward was worth it. "It will work, Anna. I promise you, it will work." He salvaged stones from the old fireplace for reuse, carefully cleaning the mortar from each stone, stacking them for later use. Then he began excavating the foundation for the new heating system. The ground was hard, the work exhausting. He dug down 3 feet, hitting bedrock, creating a stable base for the heavy masonry structure he was about to build. The foundation hole measured 6 feet by 4 feet, larger than the old fireplace footprint, and required removing perhaps 2 tons of soil and rock. His son, Eric, age 8, helped carry buckets of dirt out of the cabin. His daughter, Ingrid, age 6, brought water from the well. Even at their young ages, the children understood that this project was important, that their father was building something that would keep them warm through the coming winter. The foundation took a week to complete. James laid flat stones at the bottom of the excavation, creating a level base. He filled gaps with gravel and tamped it solid. He built up the foundation with salvaged fireplace stones, using lime mortar to bind them together, creating a structure that rose to floor level. Next came the most expensive part of the project, ordering fire brick from St. Paul. James needed approximately 200 fire bricks for the firebox and the first section of the flue system. Fire brick was expensive, perhaps 50 cents per brick in 1870, meaning the fire brick alone would cost $100, a significant sum for a frontier family. James placed his order through the general store in the nearest town, 15 miles away. The fire bricks would come by rail to St. Paul, then by wagon to the town. Then James would have to haul them home in his own wagon. The entire process would take 6 weeks. While waiting for the fire bricks, James gathered the other materials he would need. He needed river rock for the thermal mass, smooth, dense stones that would hold heat well. The best rocks were found in the stream that ran through his property, stones that had been tumbled smooth by water over thousands of years, stones that were dense and heavy, stones that would absorb heat like a battery absorbs electricity. James spent 2 weeks gathering rocks. He would wade into the stream, select stones that felt right, heavy for their size, smooth, without cracks or flaws, and carry them to his wagon. Each load was perhaps 500 pounds of rock. He made perhaps 10 trips, hauling perhaps 5,000 pounds of rock total, more than he would ultimately need, but better to have extra than to run short during construction. Eric and Ingrid helped gather smaller rocks, stones that weighed perhaps 5 to 10 pounds each. The children made a game of it, competing to see who could find the smoothest stone, the roundest stone, the prettiest stone. They did not fully understand what their father was building, but they understood that every rock they gathered was important, was part of something that would help their family. James also needed clay for mortar. There was a clay deposit on his property, perhaps a quarter mile from the cabin, where a stream had cut through a hillside and exposed a thick layer of gray clay. James dug clay from this deposit, filling buckets, hauling it back to the cabin. He needed perhaps 500 pounds of clay for the mortar that would bind the stones together. The clay had to be processed before it could be used. James mixed it with sand in a ratio of approximately 1 part clay to 3 parts sand, then added water to create a workable mortar. The sand prevented the clay from cracking as it dried, while the clay provided the binding strength. The mixture had to be the right consistency, not too wet, not too dry, and James tested batches until he got it right. By late July, the fire bricks had arrived. James made the trip to town with his wagon, loaded the 200 fire bricks carefully, and hauled them home. Each brick weighed perhaps 8 pounds, meaning the total load was 1,600 pounds. The wagon groaned under the weight, and James had to stop frequently to rest the horses. Now the real construction could begin. James built the firebox first. This was the heart of the system, the chamber where wood would burn at temperatures exceeding 200 degrees Fahrenheit. The firebox had to be built perfectly, with thin mortar joints, with fire bricks laid precisely, with no gaps or flaws that could allow heat to escape or smoke to leak. He used a special refractory mortar for the fire brick, a mixture of fire clay and sand that could withstand high temperatures without cracking. He laid each brick carefully, checking level and plumb, tapping bricks into place with a rubber mallet, scraping away excess mortar. The work was slow and meticulous. A single day's work might result in only 20 bricks laid. The firebox measured 18 inches wide, 24 inches deep, and 18 inches high, approximately 4.5 cubic feet of interior volume. This was much smaller than a traditional fireplace opening, which might be 36 inches wide and 24 inches high. But the small size was intentional. A smaller firebox would burn hotter and more efficiently, would create the intense heat needed for complete combustion. James built a door frame into the front of the firebox, using angle iron salvaged from a broken plow. The door would be made of cast iron, which he would order from the same supplier that had provided the fire bricks. The door had to seal tightly to control airflow, had to be heavy enough to withstand the heat, had to have a handle that would not conduct heat to the outside. Below the firebox, James built an ash chamber, a space where ash could fall through a grate and be removed without disturbing the fire. The ash chamber had a small door at the front, allowing James to clean out ash every few days. The ash chamber also served as the primary air intake. Air would flow through the ash chamber, up through the grate, and into the firebox, feeding the fire with oxygen. Above the ash chamber door, James installed an adjustable air vent, a sliding plate that could be opened or closed to control the amount of air entering the firebox. This was crucial for controlling the burn rate. With the vent fully open, the fire would burn hot and fast. With the vent partially closed, the fire would burn slower and more steadily. With the vent fully closed, the fire would die out. The firebox took 2 weeks to build. When it was complete, James let the refractory mortar cure for several days before proceeding to the next step. Next came the flue system, the serpentine path that would route hot exhaust gases through the masonry, transferring heat from the gases to the thermal mass. This was the most innovative part of James's design, the element that would make the system dramatically more efficient than a traditional fireplace. A traditional fireplace has a straight vertical flue. Hot gases rise straight up and exit through the chimney, taking most of their heat with them. The chimney stones absorb some heat, but most of the heat is lost to the outside air. James's serpentine flue would change that. The hot gases would be forced to travel a long, winding path through the masonry before exiting. Every foot of travel would transfer heat from the gases to the surrounding masonry. By the time the gases reached the chimney, they would be relatively cool, perhaps 200 degrees Fahrenheit instead of 200 degrees, meaning that 1,000 degrees worth of heat had been transferred to the thermal mass. James built the flue using a combination of fire brick for the hottest sections near the firebox and regular brick and stone for the cooler sections farther from the firebox. The flue had a cross-section of approximately 6 inches by 6 inches, large enough to allow gases to flow freely, small enough to maintain good heat transfer to the surrounding masonry. The flue path was complex. It started at the top of the firebox, rose vertically for 2 feet, then turned 90 degrees and traveled horizontally for 6 feet toward the back of the cabin. Then it turned 90 degrees again and traveled back toward the front of the cabin for 6 feet. Then it turned 90 degrees and rose vertically for 2 feet. Then it turned 90 degrees and traveled horizontally for 4 feet. Then it finally turned and rose vertically to connect to the exterior chimney. The total length of the flue path was approximately 22 feet, compared to perhaps 8 feet for a traditional straight chimney. The hot gases would travel nearly 3 times as far, giving up heat at every inch of the journey. Building the serpentine flue was challenging. James had to maintain the correct slope. The flue had to rise slightly as it traveled horizontally, ensuring that gases would flow properly and that condensation would drain back toward the firebox, rather than pooling in the flue. He had to ensure that the turns were smooth, without sharp angles that would restrict flow. He had to seal every joint perfectly, preventing smoke from leaking into the cabin. The flue construction took 3 weeks. James worked slowly and carefully, checking his work constantly, rebuilding sections that were not perfect. Anna watched with growing concern as the structure grew larger and more complex, wondering if James had taken on more than he could accomplish. But James persisted. He had committed to this project, had invested time and money and his family's hopes in it, and he would see it through to completion. As the flue system took shape, James began building the thermal mass chamber around it. This was the element that would store heat and radiate it slowly over many hours, turning a 2-hour fire into 12 to 24 hours of warmth. James packed river rocks around the flue path, using clay mortar to bind them together. He started at the bottom and worked his way up, layer by layer, surrounding every inch of the flue with dense, heat-absorbing stone. The rocks varied in size from perhaps 3 inches to 8 inches in diameter, and James fitted them together like a 3-dimensional puzzle, minimizing gaps, maximizing density. The thermal mass chamber grew slowly, rising from floor to ceiling, expanding to fill the space James had allocated for the heating system. The structure was massive, perhaps 3,000 pounds of brick, stone, and clay when complete. It occupied approximately 40 square feet of floor space, a significant portion of the cabin's limited interior. Anna complained about the space it took. "James, we're losing a quarter of our cabin to this thing. Are you sure it's worth it?" James understood her concern. Space was precious in a frontier cabin, but he also knew that the heating system, if it worked as designed, would be worth far more than the space it occupied. "Anna, if this works, we'll be warmer than we've ever been, and we'll use a fraction of the wood. We'll have more time, more comfort, more security. It's worth the space." The thermal mass construction took another 3 weeks. By late August, the structure was nearly complete. James built the exterior chimney last, connecting it to the end of the serpentine flue system. The chimney was shorter than a traditional fireplace chimney, so only 15 feet tall instead of 25, because the draft requirements were different. The serpentine flue created resistance to airflow, so a shorter chimney was actually better, providing just enough draft to pull air through the system without pulling too much heat out. James built the chimney from brick, using lime mortar, ensuring that it was straight and stable. He capped the top with a stone cap that would prevent rain from entering while allowing smoke to exit. He built a clean-out door at the base of the chimney, allowing him to remove any soot or creosote that might accumulate. By early September 1870, the heating system was complete. The entire structure, firebox, flue system, thermal mass chamber, and chimney, stood as a testament to James's vision, skill, and determination. It was massive, complex, and unlike anything his neighbors had ever seen. But would it work? James let the structure cure for 2 weeks, allowing the mortar and clay to dry and harden completely. During this time, neighbors came to see what James had built. They examined the structure with curiosity and skepticism, asking questions, expressing doubts. Robert Miller, James's closest neighbor, was particularly skeptical. "James, this thing is enormous. It takes up half your cabin. And you say it's going to heat better than a fireplace? I don't see how that's possible." James explained the principles: thermal mass, heat transfer, controlled combustion, but Robert remained unconvinced. "I'll believe it when I see it, James. Right now, it just looks like you've built a very expensive pile of rocks in your cabin." Other neighbors were more encouraging. John Anderson, a Swedish immigrant who had some familiarity with European heating systems, recognized what James was attempting. "I've seen something like this in Sweden, James. If you've built it right, it should work very well. The Swedes have been using masonry stoves for centuries." But even John had doubts about whether James had built it correctly. "The problem is, James, these systems are tricky. If the flue path is wrong, or if the thermal mass is not dense enough, or if the firebox does not burn hot enough, the whole thing won't work. And you've built this from memory and guesswork, without plans or expert guidance. I hope it works, but..." James understood the doubts. He had doubts himself, but he had done his best, had applied every bit of knowledge and skill he possessed, and now it was time to test whether his best was good enough. By September 1870, the heating system was complete. James let it cure for 2 weeks, allowing the mortar and clay to dry and harden. Then, in late September, he lit the first test fire. He loaded the firebox with dry pine kindling and small splits of oak. He opened the air vent fully and lit the fire. The kindling caught immediately, and within minutes, the firebox was roaring, the flames intense and white hot. James could feel the heat radiating from the firebox door, could hear the fire roaring inside the chamber. He let the fire burn for 30 minutes, feeding it small pieces of wood, building up a bed of coals. The firebox temperature climbed to perhaps 200 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough that the fire brick glowed dull red. The fire was burning so hot and so completely that there was almost no visible smoke from the chimney, just a shimmer of heat rising from the top. After 30 minutes, James closed the air vent partially, reducing the airflow, letting the fire settle into a steady, efficient burn. He added larger pieces of wood, oak splits perhaps 4 inches in diameter and 18 inches long. The fire consumed them steadily, the wood gasifying and burning completely, leaving only fine white ash. James monitored the system carefully, checking temperatures, watching for smoke or problems, adjusting the air vent to optimize the burn. After 2 hours, he let the fire die down, closing the air vent completely, letting the last coals burn out. And then he waited. The thermal mass had absorbed enormous amounts of heat during the 2-hour burn. The river rocks surrounding the flue were hot, perhaps 400 degrees Fahrenheit at the core, cooler toward the exterior. The mass would now radiate that heat into the cabin over the next 12 to 24 hours. James placed his hand on the exterior surface of the thermal mass chamber. It was warm, perhaps 120 degrees Fahrenheit, comfortable to touch, but radiating significant heat. He could feel the warmth spreading through the cabin, could feel the temperature rising, could feel the system working exactly as he had designed. Over the next 12 hours, the cabin stayed warm. The temperature remained steady at perhaps 68 degrees Fahrenheit, comfortable for the family, warm enough that they did not need extra blankets or layers of clothing. The thermal mass radiated heat slowly and evenly, warming the entire cabin, not just the area near the fire. By the next morning, 18 hours after the fire had gone out, the cabin was still warm, perhaps 62 degrees Fahrenheit. The thermal mass was still radiating heat, though the surface temperature had dropped to perhaps 90 degrees Fahrenheit. James lit another fire that morning, another 2-hour burn, recharging the thermal mass. And the cycle continued. 2 hours of fire, 12 to 18 hours of radiant heat. 2 fires per day, morning and evening, were enough to keep the cabin warm around the clock. James calculated the wood consumption each. Fire used perhaps 15 pounds of wood. 2 fires per day meant 30 pounds of wood per day. Over a 6-month winter, 180 days, that would be 5,400 pounds of wood, or approximately 2.7 cords. His old fireplace had used approximately 8 to 10 cords per winter. The new system would use less than 3 cords. James had reduced his wood consumption by 70% while actually improving the comfort and warmth of his home. The economic implications were staggering. James had been spending perhaps 120 hours per month during winter cutting, splitting, and hauling firewood for the old fireplace. With the new system, he would spend perhaps 35 hours per month, a reduction of 85 hours per month, or more than 500 hours over the winter. That time could be spent on other productive activities, on rest, on family, on anything other than the endless labor of feeding an inefficient fireplace. The financial savings were equally significant. If you valued James's labor at even a modest rate, the new heating system was saving him perhaps $200 per winter in time and wood, a huge sum for a frontier family whose total annual cash income might be only $300 to $400. And the comfort improvement was dramatic. The old fireplace had created hot and cold zones, had required constant tending, had filled the cabin with smoke when the wind blew wrong. The new system provided even, comfortable heat, required attention only twice per day, and produced almost no smoke or odor. James was thrilled. His experiment had worked better than he had hoped. His family would be warm and comfortable all winter, and he would have time and energy for other work. But he kept the system secret through the fall of 1870, not telling his neighbors about it, not explaining why his woodpile was so small. He wanted to prove the system through a full winter before making claims that might seem too good to be true. The winter of 1870 to 71 was moderate, with temperatures typically in the teens and 20s, occasional cold snaps down to 0 or below. James's heating system performed flawlessly. 2 fires per day kept the cabin warm and comfortable. The family slept well, the children were healthy, and James had time to work on other projects, building furniture, repairing tools, planning for spring planting. His neighbors, meanwhile, were struggling. Robert Miller, who had mocked James's small woodpile, was burning through his 12 cords of wood at an alarming rate. By January, Robert was cutting green wood, which burned poorly and created enormous amounts of smoke and creosote. By March, Robert was burning fence rails and scrap lumber, desperately trying to stay warm. Other neighbors faced similar problems. The winter of 1870 to 71 was not particularly severe, but the inefficiency of traditional fireplaces meant that families were spending enormous amounts of time and labor on heating, were still cold despite their efforts, and were depleting their wood supplies at unsustainable rates. In the spring of 1871, James finally revealed his heating system to his neighbors. He invited several families to visit his cabin, showed them the thermal mass heater, explained how it worked, and shared his wood consumption data. The neighbors were skeptical at first. The system seemed too good to be true. How could such a simple idea, routing smoke through masonry, make such a dramatic difference? But James's woodpile told the story. He had used less than 3 cords of wood, had stayed warm all winter, and still had wood left over. Robert Miller examined the system carefully, asked detailed questions, and finally admitted that James had discovered something remarkable. If this works as well as you say, James, you've solved one of the biggest problems we face out here. Heating costs us more, in time and labor, than almost anything else. If we could cut that by 70%. Other neighbors agreed. The potential impact was enormous. If every family could reduce their wood consumption by 70%, they could redirect hundreds of hours of labor to other productive activities. They could be warmer and more comfortable. They could reduce the risk of logging accidents. They could preserve forests and reduce the environmental impact of frontier settlement. Several neighbors asked James to help them build similar systems. James agreed, but warned them that the construction was complex, required specific materials, and needed to be done correctly to work safely and effectively. A poorly built system could be dangerous, could fill a home with carbon monoxide, could crack and leak smoke, could even cause fires. James spent the summer of 1871 helping 3 neighbors build thermal mass heaters. He supervised the construction, ensured proper design and materials, and taught the families how to operate the systems effectively. The construction took approximately 2 weeks per system, with James providing expertise and the homeowner providing labor and materials. By October 1871, 4 families in the area had thermal mass heating systems, James's original system plus 3 new ones built under his supervision. The systems varied slightly in design, adapted to different cabin sizes and layouts, but all incorporated the same basic principles: high-temperature firebox, serpentine flue, thermal mass storage. And then came the winter of 1871 to 72. The first snow fell on October 28, 1871, earlier than usual. By November 5th, temperatures had dropped below zero and would not rise above freezing again until March. This was not a normal winter. This was a winter that would be remembered for generations, a winter that would kill cattle and people, a winter that would test every survival strategy and expose every weakness in frontier life. November brought sustained cold. Temperatures stayed between 0 and 10 below zero for weeks. The ground froze solid to a depth of 4 feet. Streams and rivers froze completely. Snow accumulated, steadily, reaching depths of 3 feet by the end of the month. James Peterson's thermal mass heater performed exactly as designed. He lit fires twice per day, morning and evening, each fire burning for approximately 2 hours. The firebox would roar with intense heat, the flames white hot, the wood gasifying and burning completely. Then James would close the air vent, let the fire die down, and the thermal mass would radiate heat for the next 12 hours. The cabin stayed comfortable. The temperature inside remained between 65 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit, warm enough that the family wore normal clothing, warm enough that the children could play on the floor, warm enough that Anna could bake bread and cook meals without shivering. At night, the family slept comfortably under light blankets, the radiant heat from the thermal mass keeping the cabin warm even as temperatures outside dropped to 20 below zero. James's wood consumption was modest. He was burning perhaps 35 pounds of wood per day, 2 fires of approximately 17 pounds each. The wood burned so completely that there was almost no ash, almost no smoke, almost no waste. Every BTU of energy in the wood was being captured and used to heat the cabin. Meanwhile, Robert Miller and the other families with traditional fireplaces were struggling. Robert's fireplace consumed enormous amounts of wood, perhaps 150 pounds per day, and still the cabin was cold. The area near the fireplace would be uncomfortably hot, but the corners of the cabin remained freezing. At night, when the fire died down, the temperature would plummet, and the family would wake to frost on the inside walls. Robert was spending 4 to 5 hours per day, cutting, splitting, and hauling firewood. The work was exhausting and dangerous in the extreme cold. His hands were constantly chapped and bleeding from handling frozen wood. His back ached from the endless labor of swinging an axe and carrying heavy loads. He was losing weight, was constantly tired, was falling behind on other necessary work. By mid-November, Robert came to James's cabin to borrow tools. He stepped inside and was immediately struck by the warmth and comfort. The Peterson family was sitting at the table, the children doing schoolwork, Anna sewing, James carving a wooden toy. The cabin was warm, peaceful, comfortable. It was a stark contrast to Robert's own cabin, where his family huddled near the fireplace, wrapped in blankets, shivering despite the roaring fire. "James, how is it so warm in here?" Robert asked. "It must be 20 below outside, but your cabin feels like spring." James gestured to the thermal mass heater. "The system is working exactly as I designed it. 2 fires per day, and we stay warm around the clock." Robert examined the heater, placing his hand on the exterior surface. It was warm, perhaps 110 degrees Fahrenheit, radiating gentle, steady heat. "And you're only burning, what, 30 pounds of wood per day?" "About that, yes." Robert shook his head in disbelief. "I'm burning 5 times that much, and my family is freezing. James, I should have listened to you. I should have built one of these systems when you offered to help." "It's not too late, Robert. When spring comes, I'll help you build one." But spring was a long way off, and Robert would have to survive the winter with his inefficient fireplace. December brought even colder temperatures. On December 15, 1871, the temperature dropped to 30 below zero. On December 22nd, it reached 35 below. On December 28th, during a clear, calm night, the temperature dropped to 40 below zero. Cold enough that trees would crack from the freezing sap, cold enough that exposed skin would freeze in minutes, cold enough that breathing the air hurt. James's heating system handled the extreme cold without difficulty. He increased the size of his fires slightly, burning perhaps 20 pounds of wood per fire instead of 17, and the cabin stayed warm. The thermal mass absorbed the extra heat and radiated it steadily, maintaining a comfortable temperature even as the world outside froze solid. But for families with traditional fireplaces, December was a nightmare. They were burning wood as fast as they could cut it, and still they were cold. Some families were burning green wood, wood that had not been properly seasoned, wood that was still full of moisture because they had exhausted their supply of dry wood. Green wood burns poorly, produces enormous amounts of smoke and creosote, and provides perhaps half the heat of dry wood. The smoke from green wood was making people sick. Children developed coughs and respiratory problems. Adults suffered from constant headaches and eye irritation. The interiors of cabins were coated with black soot, and the creosote buildup in chimneys was creating a serious fire hazard. On December 30th, 1871, a cabin 3 miles from James's homestead caught fire when creosote in the chimney ignited. The family escaped, but the cabin burned to the ground. They lost everything: their home, their possessions, their food stores. They were forced to move in with relatives, doubling up in an already crowded cabin, adding strain to everyone's resources. January 1872 brought the worst weather yet. On January 10th, a blizzard moved in, bringing winds of 50 miles per hour and temperatures of 40 below zero. The blizzard lasted 3 days. Snow fell so thick that visibility was reduced to perhaps 10 feet. The wind created drifts 15 feet high. The combination of wind and cold created wind chills of perhaps 70 below zero, cold enough to kill an exposed human in minutes. James's family stayed inside during the blizzard, safe and warm. The cabin was well built and well insulated, and the thermal mass heater kept them comfortable. James lit his fires as usual, morning and evening, and the family went about their normal activities: cooking, reading, playing, resting. The children did not even realize how dangerous the weather outside was. But for families with traditional fireplaces, the blizzard was a crisis. The wind created backdrafts in chimneys, blowing smoke into cabins, making them nearly uninhabitable. Families had to choose between freezing without a fire or suffocating in smoke with a fire. Some families extinguished their fires and huddled under blankets, enduring temperatures inside their cabins that dropped below freezing. Robert Miller's family suffered terribly during the blizzard. The backdraft from the wind made their fireplace almost unusable. When Robert tried to light a fire, smoke would pour into the cabin, filling it with choking fumes. The family spent 3 days huddled in bed, wrapped in every blanket and piece of clothing they owned, shivering and miserable. Robert's youngest child, a daughter age 4, developed a severe cough during the blizzard. By the time the storm passed, she was feverish and struggling to breathe. Robert made the dangerous journey to James's cabin, desperate for help. James and Anna took the child in, warming her by the thermal mass heater, giving her hot broth and herbal tea, treating her with what medical knowledge they had. The child recovered slowly over the next week, her lungs clearing, her fever breaking. She survived, but it was a close call. "James, your heating system saved my daughter's life," Robert said, tears in his eyes. "If we had stayed in our cabin, if she had spent another night in that cold, she would have died. I know it." James understood. He had seen how the other families were suffering, had seen the woe toll that inadequate heating was taking on their health and well-being. His innovation was not just about comfort or convenience. It was about survival. February 1872 was the coldest month. Temperatures regularly dropped to 40 and 50 below zero. On February 18th, the temperature reached 55 below zero, the coldest temperature ever recorded in that part of Minnesota up to that time. At that temperature, exposed skin freezes in less than 5 minutes. Breath freezes and falls as ice crystals. Metal becomes brittle and breaks. Life itself becomes precarious. By mid-February, most families with traditional fireplaces had exhausted their wood supplies. They were cutting green wood, burning fence rails, burning furniture, burning anything that would burn. Some families were burning corn, food that should have fed them through the spring, just to stay warm. The desperation was palpable. James, meanwhile, still had more than half his wood supply remaining. He had burned approximately 2 cords of wood by mid-February and had another cord and a half in reserve. At his current burn rate, he would finish the winter with wood to spare. The contrast was stark and undeniable. James's thermal mass heater was using 1/4 the wood of a traditional fireplace while providing superior heat and comfort. The economic and practical advantages were overwhelming. In late February, Robert Miller came to James's cabin again, this time with a desperate request. His family had run out of wood completely. They had burned everything they could burn. They were facing the choice of abandoning their homestead or freezing to death. "James, I need help. I have no wood left, no way to heat my cabin. Can my family stay with you, just until the weather breaks?" James did not hesitate. "Of course, Robert. Bring your family here. We have room and we have heat. You're welcome to stay as long as you need." The Miller family, Robert, his wife Sarah, and their 3 children, moved into the Peterson cabin. 9 people in a 20 by 24-foot cabin was crowded, but it was better than freezing. And remarkably, the thermal mass heater was able to heat the cabin adequately, even with the extra people. James increased his fires slightly, burning perhaps 25 pounds of wood per fire instead of 20, and the cabin stayed warm. The Millers stayed for 2 weeks, from late February through early March. During that time, James helped Robert cut and split enough wood to get through the rest of the winter. They worked together, felling trees, hauling logs, splitting wood, building up Robert's wood supply. It was hard work in brutal cold, but it was necessary. During those 2 weeks, Robert observed the thermal mass heater closely. He watched James light fires, watched how the system operated, felt the steady, radiant heat, saw how little wood was consumed. He calculated what he could have saved, in time, in labor, in wood, in suffering, if he had built such a system before winter. "James, I've been a fool. You tried to tell me, tried to show me, and I didn't listen. This winter has cost me everything, my wood supply, my time, my family's health, nearly my daughter's life. And you've been comfortable and warm the whole time, using a fraction of the wood I've burned. I'll never doubt you again." The experience transformed Robert from a skeptic to a believer, from a doubter to an evangelist. When he returned to his own cabin in early March, he was already planning to build a thermal mass heater as soon as spring came. And he was already telling everyone he met about James's innovation, about how it had saved his family, about how it could save others. And Robert kept his word. In the spring of 1872, he built a thermal mass heater with James's help. And he told everyone he met about the system, about how it had saved the Peterson family and could save others, about how it reduced wood consumption and labor while improving comfort. Word spread rapidly through the frontier community. By the fall of 1872, 20 families in the area had built thermal mass heaters. By 1873, the number had grown to 50. By 1875, thermal mass heating was the standard for new construction in the region, with traditional fireplaces becoming rare. The system spread beyond Minnesota. Travelers and migrants carried the knowledge to other frontier regions. By the 1880s, variations of the thermal mass heater were being built in the Dakotas, Montana, Wyoming, and other cold climate regions. The basic principles, thermal mass storage, serpentine flue, controlled combustion, were adapted to local materials and conditions, but the core innovation remained the same. The economic impact was significant. Families that adopted thermal mass heating saved hundreds of hours of labor per year, saved money on wood or fuel, and improved their quality of life. The time and energy saved could be redirected to other productive activities: farming, crafts, education, community building. The environmental impact was also significant. By reducing wood consumption by 70% or more, thermal mass heating reduced deforestation, reduced air pollution from smoke, and promoted more sustainable use of forest resources. Areas with high adoption of thermal mass heating maintained healthier forests and cleaner air than areas that continued to rely on inefficient fireplaces. The safety impact was perhaps most important. Traditional fireplaces were dangerous, causing numerous house fires, chimney fires, and carbon monoxide poisonings each year. Thermal mass heaters, when properly built and operated, were much safer. The complete combustion produced little creosote, reducing chimney fire risk. The controlled airflow reduced the risk of backdrafts and carbon monoxide leaks. The thermal mass provided a buffer that prevented overheating and reduced fire risk. James Peterson became known throughout the region as the man who had solved the heating problem. He was consulted by builders, by homesteaders, by anyone planning to build a home in a cold climate. He never charged for his advice, believing that knowledge should be shared freely, that innovations that improved people's lives should be available to everyone. He refined his design over the years, incorporating feedback from the many families who had built systems, learning from failures and successes, continuously improving the efficiency and safety of the design. By the late 1870s, James had developed detailed plans and specifications that could be followed by any competent builder, making the technology accessible to anyone who wanted to use it. James Peterson died in 1891 at age 56, having lived to see his innovation adopted by thousands of families across the frontier. His original thermal mass heater, built in 1870, was still functioning in his cabin, still providing efficient, comfortable heat after more than 20 years of continuous use. The thermal mass heating principle that James pioneered never became mainstream in American home heating. By the late 1800s, coal stoves and later oil and gas furnaces became the dominant heating technologies, offering convenience and standardization that masonry heaters could not match. The knowledge of thermal mass heating was largely forgotten in America by the mid-20th century. But the principle never died completely. In Europe, particularly in Scandinavia and Eastern Europe, masonry heaters remained common throughout the 20th century. In Finland, the kaakaliuhuuni, tile stove, is still a standard feature in many homes. In Russia, the pechka, masonry stove, is a traditional heating method that continues to be used. In Austria and Germany, the kachelofen, tile stove, is experiencing a revival as people seek more efficient and sustainable heating methods. In recent decades, there has been renewed interest in thermal mass heating in America. Modern builders and homeowners concerned about energy costs and environmental impact have rediscovered the principles that James Peterson pioneered in 1870. Modern masonry heaters, often called Russian fireplaces or Finnish fireplaces, incorporate the same basic design, high-temperature firebox, serpentine flue, thermal mass storage that James developed on the Minnesota frontier. These modern systems can achieve efficiency ratings of 85 to 90% compared to perhaps 15 to 20% for traditional fireplaces. They can heat a home with 1/10 the wood of a traditional fireplace, can provide comfortable radiant heat for 12 to 24 hours from a single fire, and can reduce heating costs by 75% or more compared to conventional heating systems. The lessons from James Peterson's innovation are profound. First, efficiency matters more than abundance. James's neighbors tried to solve the heating problem by gathering more wood, by working harder, by brute force. James solved it by using less wood more efficiently, by understanding the physics of heat transfer and combustion. Second, traditional knowledge from other cultures can be adapted to new contexts. James drew on memories of Norwegian heating systems, adapted the principles to frontier conditions, and created a solution that worked in a completely different environment. Third, simple principles can have enormous impact. James's innovation was based on basic physics. Thermal mass stores heat, serpentine paths transfer heat. Controlled combustion is more efficient. Applying these principles created a 70% improvement in efficiency. Fourth, demonstration is more powerful than explanation. By proving the system through a full winter, by showing rather than telling, James convinced skeptics and created believers. Finally, sharing knowledge multiplies its impact. James shared his innovation freely, helped neighbors build their own systems, and spread the knowledge widely. As a result, thousands of families benefited. The story of James Peterson and his thermal mass heater is a story about innovation born from necessity, about the power of understanding basic principles, about the value of efficiency over brute force. It is a story about one man who refused to accept that winter heating had to be expensive, exhausting, and uncomfortable, who believed there was a better way, and who had the knowledge and determination to create it. James Peterson's heating system made winter heating cost almost nothing. Not literally nothing, but so little that the cost became negligible compared to traditional methods. His family stayed warm and comfortable on 3 cords of wood per winter, while neighbors burned 10 or 12 cords and still froze. His innovation saved hundreds of hours of labor, saved money, saved forests, and saved lives. That is the story. That is the legacy. That is the lesson that James Peterson left for all of us. That efficiency is more valuable than abundance. That knowledge is more powerful than labor. That understanding how things work is the key to making them work better. Winter heating does not have to cost everything. With the right approach, with the right knowledge, with the right system, it can cost almost nothing.
Well, sir, wasn't that pleasant? Welcome, brothers and sisters. We're going to pick up where we left off this morning by examining the Song of Solomon. Anyway, Deborah, can you come in and help us read it and explore this lovely little book in the middle of the Bible? Oh, by the way, Tim Theo is all about, his self-importance. He's got the side chat all worked up into a lather. And let's see, let me scroll back and find his cherry-picked verse that says, "You're screwed, but I'm not screwed." Let's see. Is this it? "Be sure of this, the wicked will not go unpunished, but those that are righteous will go free." Okay, so he's cherry-picking verses that make him sound important, and the rest of us are screwed because God has short little arms and cannot save. He has no ability to save. You better get it together. Yes, sir, like Tim Smith got it together. Never mind the cross and its efficacy. You better get it together. Let me back up here. There's some more. Here we go. Another cherry-picked verse. The righteous shall never be removed, but the wicked shall not inhabit the earth. Okay, so I don't know if you if you got the memo, Tim Smith, but salvation is the work of God. And the wicked shall not remain wicked, for God is in the changing business. He changes hearts and minds. He changes people's spirit and understanding. Right? So, in this narrowly cherry-picked verse, it sounds pretty dramatic that the righteous shall never be removed, but the wicked shall not inhabit the earth. That's fine. This is a wonderful prophecy, but it's still narrow regarding the complete story of God. The wicked shall not remain wicked. That's worth checking out because God is the changer. And one of our buddies, our best buddy, Paul, he was wicked beyond wicked. In fact, he claims in the Word of God, do you believe the Word of God, that he was the chief of sinners? He was the chief of sinners. And yet, God changed him. So the wicked shall not inhabit the earth. And besides, this Old Testament cherry-picked verse, Timoteo, is all about Israel. And I don't know if you know this, but it seems that if you want to be a more serious Bible student, you'd have to understand that Israel's promises were all about inhabiting the earth. Remember, the meek shall inherit the earth. But the church, which is his body, which we can find out about through Paul, we hardly have anything to do with the earth. We shall be seated among the celestials with Christ. Among the celestials, that's like a little bit higher than earth, right? But Israel was promised the earth. They shall be ruling with Christ on the earth. But the plan of God has to do with the entire universe, not just saving the good little boys like you, Tim Smith. And inhabiting the earth just happens to, coincide. If you're going to be a serious Bible student, the new heaven and new earth doesn't even show up until after the 1,000-year reign of Christ. The 1,000-year reign of Christ, that goes on this earth, and then that 1,000 years comes to an end, and then God brings in the new heavens and the new earth. So just by cherry picking this verse, you're not understanding the entire scope of the Aeonian purpose of God. And remember, we find this phrase, the Aeonian purpose of God, in Ephesians 3:11. You Christian boys have no idea what's going on with God's Aeonian purpose because you're using popular Bibles which do a hack job on the word aeon. So keep cherry picking, baby. But the problem with you cherry picking these kind of verses, Tim Smith, is that you're not quoting it to be loving and kind and sharing good news. The very tone with which you quote this verse and others is to show how important you are and to condemn the rest of us to the fires of eternity, the hell of your mythology. And we are wicked and you are not wicked, right? Because we don't use your narrative and plot line. So these are wonderful passages that you're cherry picking, but the tone and attitude with which you are cherry picking them is to browbeat us. It's not out of love that you're saying the righteous shall never be removed. That would be an interesting, wonderful stanza of this verse, just to quote it and explore its meaning, the righteous shall never be removed. But you're not putting an emphasis on that. How in the world does one become righteous? Paul does go out of his way to say that there are none righteous, no, not one. So how does one become righteous, Mr. Theo Smith, Tim Theo Smith? How does one become righteous? Well, it's the work of God that makes us righteous, that changes us. The righteous shall never be removed, but the wicked shall not inhabit the earth. That's fine. And that's part of God's grand Aeonian purpose. But it's not the complete story, because the complete story is summed up in the cross of Christ. He came into the world to save sinners. Now, are the sinners wicked? Yeah. So Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners. That's 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 15. I don't know if you've ever gotten around to reading chapter 1, verse 15, but it's special. It's so special that Paul introduces chapter 1, verse 15 by saying, faithful is the saying and worthy of all welcome. And I don't get the idea that you are very welcoming of this verse, chapter 1, verse 15, Timothy 1:15, that Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners. No, it's not a welcome phrase with you. It's not a faithful saying with you. You and your Christian pals go out of your way to marginalize this faithful saying and minimize this saying that's worthy of all welcome. And you're dragging our asses over to this god-awful verse that you're using out of context and cherry picking just to browbeat the rest of us sinners. The wicked shall not inhabit the earth. Ooh, I got a cold chill down my back. Oh, by the way, you guys, if you want to help me read this Song of Solomon thing, click the StreamYard link and come in. So thank you, Tim, Theo, for sharing such wonderful news that God is not able. And remember our most recent discovery that the word able and the word power are the same word in the Greek of the New Testament. God has no power to save. He cannot save the wicked. He cannot save the sinners. You have to rely on the Tim Theo narrative that you save yourself, because God can't be bothered by this salvation thing. How do the righteous become righteous, and why are the wicked wicked? You are totally focused on man and man's behavior and man's attitude and man's understanding and man's ability. But I would like to encourage you and your Christian pals to focus on God and God's ability to save and God's power over sin, condemnation, and death. It is entirely demonstrated in the cross of Christ. God's ability and power over sin, condemnation, and death is demonstrated in the cross of Christ. Got it? Oh, by the way, Deborah, did you reply whether or not you can come in? Because the last time I asked you, you said your computer is on the fritz. I'm scrolling backwards to see what I can see. Deb is agreeing, no cherries there. Now the same thing, same in the majority of Christian churches littering the street corners of the USA. They are more expensive than the Mustang Ranch. Okay, forward march. So we've got this Song of Solomon business, right? It's an obscure little book, and hardly anybody understands it and appreciates its depth. But so I kind of presented this morning that it's more understandable if if you can figure out that the Song of Solomon is like a playwright. If you compare it to, say, um, the Phantom of the Opera, just imagine these are the characters on the stage who are speaking and what is being said. And so we can see, I think we can see, and I don't see any reason why we can't say that there are three characters on the stage in this Song of Solomon. There's the male, the female, and the peanut gallery. Okay. And so the female has her part. It's a love song, it's a love story between the male and the female. And the peanut gallery jumps in every little bit to fill in the gaps for us and make the story make more sense. Okay. So I gave it a color code. In green is the she said business. In the light reddish shade is the he said business. He said, she said. And then there, for the no color part, that's the peanut gallery. Okay, so what do we got here? The Song of Solomon, the opening line would be the peanut gallery. Verse 1. Just imagine the peanut gallery on the stage being like a chorus of people saying in unison. But for affection here, I called them the peanut gallery. There's two main characters. Dang that thing. There's two main characters. Okay. The male and the female, and the love that's going on between them, and the growth between them, the growth in love between them. And then the chorus fills in the blanks and shapes the story. And they're the peanut gallery, and there's no color change for them. Okay, so the I'll call them, instead of the peanut gallery, I'll call them the chorus for this little episode. Okay, the chorus sings out the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. And then the audience hushes. Okay. And then the female says, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for thy love is better than wine. Because of the savor of thy good ointments, thy name is as ointment poured forth. Therefore do the virgins love thee. Draw me. What a dramatic way to open up this story. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for thy love is better than wine, because the savor of thy good ointment, thy name, is as an ointment poured forth. Therefore do the virgins love thee. So I'll throw in a few comments along the way, because we're looking for God, and we're looking for maybe a hint toward the operation of God and the plan of God, and maybe even hints toward what we know to be the Aeonian purpose of God. And the Aeonian purpose of God, presented in Paul's letters in an executive summary kind of way, shorten it up, we get Romans 8:20-21. We get Ephesians 1, verses 10 and 11. We get Ephesians 1, verses 23 and 22, 23. And 1 Corinthians 15, 20-28. Those would be executive summaries of what's going on in this grand, big, creative effort of God, okay? Well, in Philippians 2, 5-11, that's another executive summary of what's going on. And there it says that Christ left his former estate and thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but humbled himself, the kenosis, and throughout this whole psalm, the Song of Solomon, we're going to see the kenosis referred to, the emptying of ourselves and the emptying of the gal. Maybe even we can see the emptying of her lover. But in Philippians 2:5-11, we see that Christ emptied himself of his lofty state and took on the form of a slave and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. This is the kenosis. Emptied himself and became obedient even to the death of the cross. Wherefore, Philippians 2:5-11, verse 9, wherefore God highly exalts him and gives him a name above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should be bowing and every tongue acclaiming Jesus Christ is Lord. So his name, because he emptied himself, he gets a name above every name. And so maybe we could borrow this, verse 3, because of the savor of thy good ointments, thy name is as ointment poured forth. Because throughout the scriptures and throughout our normal culture, in every generation, your name is an important thing. If you're a plumber and you do a lousy job, you get a bad name. If you do a great job, you get a good name. If you're a building contractor and you build shitty houses that fall apart, your name is pretty bad. You don't want to sign your building if you know you cut corners everywhere. And Christ did not cut corners. He kenosis himself. He humbled himself and became obedient even to the death of the cross. Therefore, wherefore God gives him a name above every name. And so here, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for thy love is better than wine. Because of the savor of thy good ointments, thy name is as ointment poured forth. Therefore do the virgins love thee. Draw me. That's the end of her opening line. Very important. A very important opening line for this story. Shall we call the Song of Solomon an executive summary of the operations of God in creating the universe out of love? Draw me. Draw me. Do we save ourselves? According to the Tim Theo, JG, Eric, Veckel, Jill, according to their storyline, we save ourselves because God does not draw us. And then we have that passage in John that says, if I be lifted up on the cross, I will draw all men to me. And we have learned that the word draw in the Greek New Testament is the same word as drag. And we see that same word when the disciples were out there fishing on a boat and they draw the nets filled with fishes into the boat. They dragged the nets into the boat. That was the same word, draw, drag. So the fishes didn't have any free will about the matter. Draw me, the woman says. Draw me. We are ever so dependent on God to draw us. It is his show. Oh, look at the very second word in this opening soliloquy. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. So that's one thought there. And then she kind of speaks to him, for thy love is better than wine. So can you see her turning her head? She says to the audience, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. And then she turns her head and looks at him, for thy love is better than wine, because the savor of thy good ointments, thy name is as an ointment poured forth. Therefore do the virgins love thee. Draw me. Oh, So then the chorus replies, we will run after thee. Can you hear it? They're chiming in with her. We will run after thee. And then she says, the king hath brought me into his chambers. Oh my God. This is very intimate. I mean, we're just barely into the story, and we get the whole story summed up in 3 phrases. First, the choir sings, the chorus sings, the Song of Songs, which is Solomon. Then she says, let him draw me, or let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. Please draw me. And then the chorus says, we will run after thee. And she says, the king has brought me into his chambers. This is the complete story. But now we're going to back up and do flashbacks. So the choir, the chorus, the peanut gallery says, we will be glad and rejoice in thee. We will remember thy love more than wine. The upright love thee. And then the chick says, I am black, but comely. O ye daughters of Jerusalem. So she's speaking to the chorus, the peanut gallery. I am black, but comely. I am black, but comely. Where can we go with this? Could we dare to say, there are none righteous, no, not one, all have sinned, but yet God sees us somehow as beautiful because of what Christ did on the cross? We are assessed as righteous. Remember 2 Corinthians 5, 18 through 21? God was in Christ, conciliating the world to himself, not counting their sins against them. I am black but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, as the curtains of Solomon. Look not upon me because I am black, because the sun hath looked upon me. My mother's children were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyards, but mine own vineyard have I not kept. Tell me, O thou whom my soul loveth. Oh, now she's speaking to the man. Tell me, O thou whom my soul loveth, where thou feedest, and where thou makest thy flock to rest at noon. For why should I be as one that turneth aside by the flocks of thy companions? So nobody else will do. His companions, they might be nice, but she's interested in feeding his flocks. And then the peanut gallery, the choir, the chorus jumps back in. For if thou know not, thou fairest among women, go thy way. Go thy way forth by the footsteps of the flock, and feed thy kids beside the shepherd's tents. This sounds like, verse 8 sounds like Tim Theo and all the Christians. If thou know not, thou fairest among women, go thy way. Real snarky, real self-righteous. Feed thy kids beside the shepherd's tents. But she kind of ignores them. And she says, I have compared thee, O my love, to a company of horses in the Pharaoh's chariots. Thy cheeks are comely with rows of jewels, thy neck with chains of gold. She doesn't even address them and their smart-ass remark. She's just got her eyes focused on him. I have compared thee, O my love, to a company of horses in Pharaoh's chariots. And then the peanut gallery is back at it and kind of changes the subject and says, we will make thee borders of gold with studs of silver. Oh, so they're bragging, the peanut gallery, the chorus. They're trying to what? make themselves self-important to attract the attention of the lover, the male lover in this story. Over here, we will make thee borders of gold with studs of silver. Stop distracting me, she says. While the king sitteth at his table, my spikenard sendeth forth the smell thereof. A bundle of myrrh is my well-beloved unto me. He shall lie all night betwixt my breast. My beloved is unto me as a cluster of camphor in the vineyards of Engedi. Behold, thou art fair, my love. Behold, thou art fair. Thou hast dove's eyes. Behold, thou art fair, my beloved. Yea, pleasant also our bed is green. The beams of our house are cedar, and our rafters of fir. She's rather focused on her beloved. 3 times, behold, thou art fair, behold, thou art fair, behold, thou art fair. She's rather focused, perhaps even more focused than the chorus, than the peanut galleries trying to get his attention. We will bribe these, like the Tim Theo crew and the Christian crew, and they think that they're special. They think they deserve God's attention because they repented, obeyed, stopped sinning, and all that stuff, They have gone beyond the realm where God says he is no respecter of persons. They demand respect. We will make thee borders of gold with studs of silver. And she's not boasting. She's in love and self-effacing. While the king sitteth at his table, my spikenard sendeth forth the smell thereof. Is she trying? So far, she's just wearing spikenard. And the bundle of mirth, a bundle of mirth is my well-beloved. And she's smelling him and he's smelling her. Something is going on here. My beloved is unto me as a cluster of camphor in the vineyards of Engedi. Behold, thou art fair, my love. Behold, thou art fair. Thou hast dove's eyes. Behold, thou art fair, my beloved. Yea, pleasant also to our bed is green. The beams of our house are cedar, and our rafters of fir. And finally, is this right? Yeah, finally, he says, he speaks up finally by chapter 2. I am the rose of Sharon and the lily of the valleys. As the lily among thorns, so is my love among the daughters. So he's saying that he can see something special in her. Maybe inferring that though the chorus of people is the thorns, annoying as hell. But he sees something special in her. And she says, as an apple tree among the trees of the woods, so is my beloved among the sons. I sat down under his shadow with great delight, and his fruit was sweet to my taste. And he brought me to the banqueting house, and his banner over me was love. His banner over me was love. Stay me with flagons, comfort me with apples, for I am sick with love. I am sick of love. His left hand is under my head, and his right hand doth embrace me. I charge you, O daughters of Israel, of the daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you by the roes and by the hinds of the field that you stir not up nor awake my love till he please. So verse 7 sounds like she's begging them, commanding them. I charge you. Stop acting like you are self-important. that you deserve salvation because you repent, believe, obey, give to charity, pay tithes. Don't stir him, don't awaken him until he please. The voice of my beloved, behold, he cometh leaping upon the mountains, skipping upon the hills. My beloved is like a roe and a young hart. Behold, he standeth behind our wall. He looketh forth at the windows, showing himself through the lattice. My beloved spake and said unto me, Rise up, my love, my fair one. For lo, the winter is past, the rain is over and gone, the flowers appear on the earth, the time of the singing of the birds is come, and the voice of the turtle is heard in our land. Now, if you don't think this is poetry, what is the voice of the turtle? I didn't know turtles had voices. It's got to, there's so much poetry in this and metaphor. And who can understand it? The flowers appear on the earth. The time of the singing of birds is come. The voice of the turtle is heard in our land. The fig tree putteth forth her green figs. This is very promising. The plot of the story right here is very promising. The fig putteth forth her green figs, and the vine with the tender grape give a good smell. Arise, my love, my fair one, and come away. My dove, that art in the cleft of the rock, in the secret places of the stairs, let me see thy countenance. Let me hear thy voice, for sweet is thy voice, and thy countenance is comely. Take us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes. My beloved is mine, and I am his. He feedeth me among the lilies. Until the break of day, until the day break, and the shadows flee, turn, my beloved, and be thou like a roe and a young hart upon the mountains of Bether. So this is still young in their relationship. It's early in their relationship. And she is so excited that she says, my beloved is mine. And this is has to be a sign of immaturity. She's still putting herself first. Maybe she's even like the chorus, the peanut gallery. My beloved is mine, and I am his. This is bragging. He feedeth me among the lilies. And we're going to see this very same language pop up 2 more times. But she's going to rearrange the words because she grows in love with him, and he grows in love with her. My beloved is mine, and I am his. He feedeth me among the lilies. By night on my bed I sought him whom my soul loveth. I sought him, but found him not. This could be referencing the very kenosis that we all experience in our grand journey of faith. I know some of you are like me. I sought him, but I found him not. We go through this. It's tough. I sought him, but I found him not. I will rise now and go about the city in the streets and in the broadways, and I will seek him whom my soul loveth. I sought him, but I found him not. Oh my God. The watchmen that go about the city found me, to whom I said, saw ye him whom my soul loveth? It was but a little that I passed from them, but I found him. I found him whom my soul loveth. I held him and would not let him go until I had brought him into my mother's house and into the chamber of her that conceived me. I charge you, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, by the roes and by the hinds of the field, that ye stir not up, nor awaken my love, till he please. So by now, I think we can say that there's kind of a battle going on between the chick and the chorus. Maybe we can even say that the chorus on stage is a bunch of cackling hens, a bunch of self-righteous Karens with a healthy dose of the tyranny of the shoulds, because they've got plenty to say and it's not good. I charge you, O cackling hens of Jerusalem. I charge you, O Tim Theo. I charge you, Jill, JG, that ye stir not up nor awake my love till he please. And then the cackling hens said, who is this that cometh out of the wilderness like pillars of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all powders of the merchants? Behold his bed, which is Solomon's. 80 valiant men are about it, of the valiant of Israel. And they all hold swords, being expert in war. Every man hath his sword upon his thigh, because of the fear in the night. King Solomon made himself a chariot of the wood of Lebanon. He made the pillars thereof of silver, the bottom thereof of gold, the covering of it of purple, the midst thereof being paved with love, for the daughters of Jerusalem go forth. Oh, so this one should go back to green. Verse 11 must be the chick is speaking again. So let's adjust the color code and insert our notation. There we go. So the chick speaks up and interrupts the self-righteous daughters of Jerusalem, because they're in it for themselves. They're the gold diggers. They say, oh, he's got an army, men who are expert at war. We're in. He's powerful. We want him. And then she says, go forth, daughters of Zion, and behold, King Solomon, with the crown wherewith his mother crowned him in the day of his espousal, and in espousals plural, and in the day of the gladness of his heart. So she is speaking in verse 11 on a different level. They are on one level of conversation and she's on a different level of conversation, and she's not impressed. You might say they're speaking past each other, but she's telling them there's things going on here that you don't understand. You can see it in, okay, so the whole of the Song of Solomon is a metaphor, and then she uses a metaphor within the metaphor and says, to the daughters of Zion, the daughters of Jerusalem, behold the king of Solomon with the crown wherewith his mother crowned him in the day of his espousals and in the day of the gladness of his heart. I'm quite sure from the story thus far that they have no idea what she is talking about. What are they interested in? The peanut gallery. The daughters of Zion, the daughters of Jerusalem say, Who is this that cometh out of the wilderness like pillars of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all powders of the merchants? Behold his bed, which is Solomon. So they know that there's something, they're using a metaphor too. Behold his bed, which is Solomon's. 60 valiant men are all about it. They're of the valiant of Israel. They all hold swords, being expert at war. They're seeing, in a similar way to my experience with the Christian boys, all they see when you talk about power, all that the world sees when the world talks about power, like the mighty power of the U.S. military, is destructive power. But if you are familiar with Paul's evangel, the power, the real power being displayed to us is the power of life giving, because God raised Christ from among the dead. And when you catch on to what's going on, if you're anything like me, if you catch on to what's going on, you're no longer impressed with the power of Washington, D.C. and the destructive ability of tanks and bombs and ships and swords. But these gals from the peanut gallery, they're very interested in the destructive power that they see around Solomon. And we can infer easily that Solomon is writing this love story about himself, or using himself to tell the story of this song of Solomon. And she says, "Go forth, ye daughters of Zion, and behold what you're missing about King Solomon, because he was crowned wherewith his mother crowned him, with the crown that his mother crowned him with, in the day of his espousals, in the day of the gladness of his heart." And so the Solomon character jumps in and says to her, apparently to her, "Behold, thou art fair, my love. Behold, thou art fair. Thou hast dove's eyes with thy locks. Thy hair is as a flock of goats that appear from Mount Gilead. Thy teeth are like the flock of sheep that are even shorn, which came up from the washing. Wherefore every one bears twins, and none is barren among them. Thy lips are like the thread of scarlet." Not big fat lips, like the thread of scarlet, and thy speech is comely, and thy temples are like the piece of pomegranate within thy locks. Thy neck is like the tower of David, built for an armory, whereon there hangs 1,000 bucklers, all shields of mighty men. 2 breasts are like 2 young roes that are twins, which feed among the lilies until the day break and the shadows flee away. I will get me in the mountains of myrrh and to the hill of frankincense. Thou art fair, thou art all fair, my love. There is no spot in thee. Come with me from Lebanon, my spouse, with me from Lebanon. Look from the top of Amana, from the top of Shinner and Hermon, from the lion's den and from the mountains of the leopards. Thou hast ravished my heart. Thou hast ravished my heart, my sister, my spouse. Thou hast ravished my heart with one of thine eyes. A glance. That must be a reference, a metaphorical way of saying just a glance. And he calls her my heart, and he calls her my sister, and he calls her my spouse. And this covers, what shall we say, 3 aspects of love: my heart, my sister, my spouse. by him calling her my sister. What a fine metaphor to say there's nothing can change our love and our relationship, because your sister will always be your sister. My heart, my spouse. Thou hast ravished my heart with one of thine eyes, with one chain of thy neck. So maybe she took off a chain and gave it to him. How fair is thy love, my sister, my spouse. How much better is thy love than wine, and the smell of thine ointments than all spices. Thy lips, my spouse, drop as the honeycomb. Honey and milk are under thy tongue. Oh my God. So she doesn't bitch and complain, at least not at this moment in the plot line. Honey and milk are under thy tongue, and the smell of thy garments is like the smell of Lebanon. And Lebanon at the time was famous for a lot of cedar trees, so I'm quite sure it's a reference to how fresh it smelt. A garden enclosed is my sister, my spouse. A spring shut up, a fountain sealed. That's very promising. A spring shut up, so the water is available for the garden. This is kind of prophetic poetry. What do you do with the garden? You're going to need to water it. And it has a spring, and nobody can get at the spring. It's a spring shut up and a fountain sealed. Thy plants are an orchard of pomegranates with pleasant fruits, camphor with spikenard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon with all trees of frankincense and myrrh and aloes with all the chief spices, a fountain of gardens, not just a garden, but a fountain of gardens, a well of living waters and streams from Lebanon. So after all that, see, he had a lot to say. After all that, she replies and says, awake, O north wind, and come, thou south wind, right? Awake, north wind, and come, thou south, blow upon my garden, and the spices thereof may flow. Let my beloved come into his garden and eat his pleasant fruits. Oh my God. The intimacy is growing. Chapter 5. So the old boy says, I am come into my garden, my sister, my spouse. I am come into my garden. I have gathered my mirth and my spice. I have eaten my honeycomb with my honey. I have drunk my wine with my milk. Eat, O friends. Drink ye, drink abundantly, O beloved. Wow, could we make a big deal out of that? About the joy of the Lord and his happiness with his doings and his creation and his creative ability. Oh, friends, eat, yea, drink abundantly. Oh, beloved, I sleep, but my heart awaketh. It is the voice of my beloved that knocketh, saying, open to me, my sister, saying, open to me, my sister, my love, my dove, my undefiled, for my head is filled with dew and my locks with the drops of the night. I have put off my coat. How shall I put it on? I have washed my feet. How shall I defile them? Is this a challenging quip that he's laying on her? Let's see how she responds. She said, my beloved put his hand in the hole of the door, and my bowels were moved for him. I rose to open to my beloved, and my hands dropped with the myrrh, and my fingers with sweet-smelling myrrh upon the handles of the lock. I opened to my beloved, but my beloved had withdrawn himself and was gone. My soul failed when he spake. I sought him, but could not find him. I called him, but he gave me no answer. Oh my God. Shall we call this intense drama? This is not what she wanted. He gave me no answer. The watchmen that went about the city found me. To make matters worse, they smote me. They wounded me. You're just a crazy bitch. There is no one out there. I called him, but he gave me no answer. The watchmen smote me. They wounded me. The keepers of the wall, they took away my veil from me. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, that ye tell him that I am sick with love. I am sick of love. And so the daughters of Jerusalem, the peanut gallery, the choir, the chorus of knuckleheads says, what is thy beloved more than another beloved? Thou fairest among women. What is thy beloved more than another beloved, that thou dost so charge us? Man, these bitches are snarky. So she replies, my beloved is white and ruddy, the chiefest among 10,000. His head is as the most fine gold. His locks are bushy and black as a raven. His eyes are as the eyes of a dove by the rivers of waters washed with milk and fitly set. His cheeks are as a bed of spices, as sweet flowers. His lips are like lilies, dropping sweet-smelling myrrh. His hands are as gold rings set with the beryl. His belly is as bright ivory overlaid with sapphires. His legs are as pillars of marble set upon sockets of fine gold. His countenance is as Lebanon, excellent as the cedars. His mouth is most sweet. Yea, he is altogether lovely. This is my beloved. This is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. Wow. And how can the daughters of Jerusalem contradict this reply? Well, let's find out. So this peanut gallery, daughters of Jerusalem, says, whither is thy beloved gone, O thou fairest among women? Whither is thy beloved turned aside, that we may seek him with thee? God, it sounds like Eric and JG and Jill. Whither is thy beloved gone? That we may seek him with thee. Oh my God. She said, my beloved is gone down into his garden, into the beds of spices, to feed in the gardens and gather lilies. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He feedeth among the lilies. Now remember, in chapter 2, she says, my beloved is mine. Let's go back up to chapter 2. It's really precious to capture the whole cadence of this grand story of love. My beloved is mine and I am his. My beloved is mine and I am his. And now, where are we? Chapter 6. Yeah, my beloved is mine and I am his, and now I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. The order of the phraseology has changed. He is coming first out of her mouth. I am my beloved's. I belong to him, and my beloved is mine. So she's softening a bit with her self-importance. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. It's no longer my beloved is mine, and I am his. No, I am his, and he is mine. So finally, he jumps into the picture and says, Thou art beautiful, my love, as Tirzar, comely as Jerusalem, terrible as an army with banners. Turn away thine eyes from me, for they have overcome me. Thy hair is as a flock of goats that appear from Gilead. Thy teeth are as a flock of sheep which go up from the washings. Wherefore every one beareth twins, and there is not one barren among them. As a piece of pomegranate are thy temples within thy locks. There are 80 queens, and 80 concubines, and virgins without number. My dove, my undefiled, is but one. She is the only one of her mother. She is the choice one of her that beareth her. The daughters saw her and blessed her. Yea, the queens and the concubines, they praised her. Who is she that looketh forth as the morning, fair as the moon, clear as the sun, and terrible as an army with banners? I went down into the garden of nuts to see the fruits of the valley, and to see whether the vine flourished and the pomegranates budded, or ever I was aware my soul made me like the chariots of Abinadab. Return, return, O Shulamite, return, return, that we may look upon thee. What shall we see in the Shulamite? As it were, the company of 2 armies. How beautiful are thy feet with shoes, O prince's daughter. The joints of thy thighs are like jewels, the work of the hands of a cunning workman. Thy navel is like a round goblet, which wanteth not liquor. Thy belly is like a heap of wheat set about with lilies. Thy 2 breasts are like 2 young roes that are twins. Thy neck is as an ivory tower. Thine eyes are like fish pools in Hebron, by the gates of Bath-rabbim. Thy nose is as the tower of Lebanon, which looketh toward Damascus. Thine head upon thee is like Carmel, and the hair of thine head like purple. The king is held in the galleries. How fair and how pleasant art thou, O love, for delights. This is this thy statue. This thy stature is like the palm tree, thy breasts like clusters of grapes. I said, I will go up to the palm tree. I will take hold of the boughs thereof. Now also thy breast shall be as clusters of the vine, and the smell of thy nose like apples. And the proof of my mouth and the roof of my mouth, like the best wine for my beloved, that goes down sweetly, causing the lips of those who are asleep to speak. And breathlessly she says, I am my beloved's, and his desire is toward me. She no longer makes claim to him. Here in verse 10, she is entirely focused on him. And she doesn't lay claim to him. She doesn't say, he belongs to me. It's totally different now. We're getting to a very mature stage in the storytelling. His desire is toward me. What can possibly go wrong? I am my beloved's, and his desire is toward me. And then he picks it up again and says, come, my beloved, let us go forth into the field. Let us lodge in the villages. Let us get up early to the vineyards. Let us see if the vine flourish, whether the tender grapes appear and the pomegranates bud forth. There will I give thee my loves. The mandrakes will give smell. And at our gates are all manner of pleasant fruits, new and old, which I have laid up for thee, my beloved. Oh, that thou wert as my brother that sucked the breasts of my mother. When I should find thee without, I would kiss thee. Yea, I should not be despised. I would lead thee and bring thee into my mother's house, who would instruct me. I would cause thee to drink of spiced wine, of the juice of my pomegranate. Such grand and glorious view of what the two of them will experience. It is a union of work. We will get up early and go to the vineyards. There's a lot to do up ahead. And she responds by saying, his left hand should be under my head and his right hand should embrace me. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, that you stir not up, nor awake my love until he please. This is his story to tell. The daughters of Jerusalem, please do not interrupt the story. Do not stir up or wake my love till he please. But, they're kind of boneheaded. They say, who is this that cometh from the wilderness, leaning upon her beloved? I raised thee up under the apple tree, and there thy mother brought thee forth. There she brought thee forth that bare thee. Are they even with the program here? No, they're still thinking about themselves. They're challenging her. Who is this that cometh from the wilderness, leaning upon her beloved? It's almost like they're less than impressed. And she replies, set me as a seal upon thine heart, and as a seal upon thine arms. For love is strong as death. Jealousy is cruel. So could we say that this jealousy is coming from the peanut gallery, the chorus of the daughters of Jerusalem? Jealousy is cruel as the grave. The coals thereof are the coals of fire, which hath a most vehement flame. And they're back at it. The peanut gallery says, many waters cannot quench love, neither can the floods drown it. If a man would give all the substance of his house for love, it would be utterly contemned. We have a little sister. She has no breast. What shall we do for our sister in the day when she shall be spoken for? If she be a wall, we will build upon her a palace of silver. And if she be a door, we will enclose her with boards of cedar. So the gal says, I'm a wall, and my breasts are like towers. Then I was in his eyes as the one that found favor. How dismissive she is of the peanut gallery. And then this chorus of Karen says again, Solomon had a vineyard at Baal-Harmon. He let out the vineyard to the keepers, every one for the fruit thereof, to bring 1,000 pieces of silver. Yes, and so she says, my vineyard, which is mine, is before me. Thou, O Solomon, must have 1,000. and those that keep the fruit thereof 200. Thou that dwellest in the gardens, the companions hearken to thy voice. Cause me to hear it. The companions hearken to thy voice. Cause me to hear it. Make haste, my beloved, and be thou like to a roe, or to a young hart upon the mountains of spices. The end. Mm-hmm. Okay. I hope you were able with her to turn your eyes to him, and with the grace of the Lord to be able to say, I am my beloved's, and his desire is toward me. And not listen to the naysayers that we call affectionately the James Gang. And in this storyline, they're called the daughters of Jerusalem and the daughters of Zion. But when God looks at us, he says, how beautiful are thy feet with shoes, O prince's daughter. I am my beloved's, and his desire is toward me. Okay, I'll put in the after show link. We'll scoot out of here and come on in. After show. And we'll have fun hanging out and sipping coffee if you have it. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Bye for now.